All right, let's do this. How are you? I'm Jer Stays. It's Friday, December 27th, 2019.
And I'm Shianne Nocerini. I know I usually edit this podcast, but I'm on microphone today. Welcome to Your Daily Detroit. You know, Jer, you and Sven talked all about your favorite episodes, but I have some of my own too.
Well, it is the holidays, and let's be honest, you are the audio editor. You listen to our disembodied voices all day for more than like 400 episodes. I think like you're in a pretty good position to make some choices.
Yeah, and when you think about it, it's really terrifying sometimes. Like, there's some things where I'm glad that I'm cutting it out. Anyway, on to my favorite episode. I loved the conversation that you and Sven Gustafson had with Cynthia Canty from Michigan Radio.
Oh, she's great. She's great.
Right. And I mean, I've been listening to her for years, even before she was on Stateside.
Right. She was Jim Harper's morning show,
yes.
Right? And then also television.
Yes. So, I mean, I've been a big fan of hers forever. And we actually recorded this interview in mid-July. And her last show was last week.
That is kind of great timing. And she's been such an important voice in our region. So, and I'll be honest, I was kind of amazed that she said yes to our little band, but I'm really glad that she did. And so, yeah, I'm definitely excited to hear this one.
Right. So, you know what else is really cool?
What's that, Shy?
So, we have a new member.
Woohoo!
Nick, you are awesome. Thank you for supporting Daily Detroit.
And if you want to be cool like Nick and help create content that helps make for a better city and region, join us at patreon.com/Daily Detroit.
And without further ado, my favorite interview from this year, Cynthia Canty.
Cynthia Canty joins us in the studio today. She is the host of Michigan Radio's program Stateside. Cynthia, welcome to Daily Detroit.
I'm so happy to be here with you. I love your digs. This studio is so cool, and I'm jealous already because you have loads of windows and natural light. We do not. We are little mushrooms. We go into an office and a studio that they created for us in an internal space. So we were grateful for the space, but we're little mushrooms. We never see the light.
Yeah. And I just want to mention to our listeners that Cynthia has a much better broadcast voice than I do.
Oh, you have a great voice. Yeah, no worries. I always tell people when they say they like my voice that I credit my choral teacher in ninth grade at Detroit's Immaculata High School. Rest in peace, Immaculata High School.
Was that a Catholic school?
Yes, it was on the corner of Mary Grove College. Of that campus. So it was at Green Lawn and McNichols. And my mother had gone to Mary Grove, and I loved that whole corner. And so, yes, I went to Immaculata. And in ninth grade in 1967, I went to choir, and I was put in first soprano. Mm-hmm. And after about 3 weeks, Sister Borromeo, who left and is now Eileen Kelly, beloved music teacher in the Dearborn School District. But Sister Borromeo looked at me and said, "You move there." To the altos.
Well, I'm a son of a choral music teacher in Plymouth Canton schools. She's retired now, long time retired, but
I love our music teachers. Music teachers take this clay that is not real pretty and they create something beautiful out of it.
Yep,
Band directors, God bless them.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story of my voice, and I want to thank Sister Borromeo for moving me to the altos.
Holler. All right, so Cynthia, you announced your plans for retirement, of course, after 40 plus years last month. So I'm just curious, what's it been like since then? I mean, is it exciting to kind of see the end of the tunnel?
You know why? Because it's just time. I had in my mind that I wanted to cross the tape, run through, do the marathon, say, I've been on the air in this town for 40 years.
Yeah.
And this is the year I get to do it. And it felt right. I've been thinking about it. When's the right time? And all the little cherries in the slot machine lined up. Bing, bing, bing. It's time. And it was predicated when I was visiting our cottage in Ireland. For the last 22 years, we've had a little cottage in West Cork in Ireland because, long story, but I married the permanent souvenir of my junior year in Ireland when I was in college. I met a local fella. And so I've had ties to County Cork since I met him in 1973, and we've been married since 1976. So we've been going.
Are you Irish yourself?
I have some Irish blood as well as some Spanish blood. So I'm a nice, kind of interesting mix.
That's kind of zesty, yeah.
It is. And for the 22 years that we've had that cottage, you go for 2 weeks, you go for 3 weeks, you get there and you're so happy to be there, and immediately the clock's running out. So this last trip in May, got on the plane on the Saturday, and I just hated leaving family and close friends who feel like family there. Feel like we're part of the community in that country village in West Cork. And I just thought, you know what? I'm ready. I don't want to have to leave after 2 weeks, and I want to be able to go for extended spells while I still have my health. And I think that's something you realize.
And you're still pretty young, right?
I'm
you look
65.
Young. Yeah, well, you're a young-looking 65.
Thank you very much. I'm proud of it. I've realized, why hide it? I mean,
that's part of my strategy is just to butter you up. And
there you go. Yeah. No, thank you. But, so I am healthy, touch wood. I'm grateful for that. So let's get some travel in and enjoy that time while I can, because we all know someday you're going to have a bad phone call.
Yeah.
You know?
So 40 plus years in the broadcast news business here in Detroit. You had stints at WNIC, WDTX, WMGC. You were on TV on WKBD.
And I started at WMUZ, Praise FM. I started on a Christian radio station.
Oh, my goodness.
1 a.m. to 8 a.m., 6 mornings a week for $180 a week.
Was that all talk, or were you doing music?
I was doing newscasts that they buried in the middle of the night. Oh. That's how I got started, was they just needed a warm body to fulfill their FCC news requirements. And they would do 10 minutes of news at 2, 3, 4, and 5. So they would pack it all in overnight so they could keep running the religious broadcasters like Jerry Falwell during the day.
Yeah, and you're making the money sign.
Money. That's where the money was, not in doing newscasts. So they hired someone like me for $180 a week, and I'm grateful because I got to start my career in Detroit. And then I went to WNIC.
Interesting. So long time in broadcast business, a lot of changes in that time. I mean, talk about that. What's changed in broadcast media over that time?
Well, certainly I've seen, I'll talk about radio because that's where most of my time was. I was in TV news as well as an anchor and a reporter for years. But let's talk about radio. The big, huge conglomerates that own a bunch of stations, and it's so bizarre. Clear Channel. When I worked, exactly. I mean, WNIC is now part of the iHeartRadio Clear Channel empire. But when I started, it was Josephson Broadcasting. It was the family company. So all those intimate family companies have been, absorbed into big, huge companies where your competition is getting coffee next to you in the coffee machine room. That's what's weird. So when we went to...
What do you mean by that?
All right, so we went from WNIC to Magic to WMGC. So we left. Jim Harper's contract was up. He felt he wanted to have a chance to work for a more intimate family company. So we left altogether. We went with him and went to work for Greater Media. Well, Greater Media in Royal Oak Township owned 105.1, which had been a number of things, including initially WQRS, classical.
Oh, yeah.
But they owned WCSX and they owned WRIF.
Yeah.
So there we all are in the same building. So I'm saying hi to Drew and Mike. They're our competition. We were saying hi to JJ and Lynn. They're the competition. And we're all like, in line for the bathroom and getting coffee. That is odd. So you're in the same family, but you're still trying to beat the pants off each other.
Yeah. And, I keep reading or hearing that commercial radio is really like a rough business nowadays. Like it's just very volatile and things change all the time.
Well, what happened that we saw over the course of our time at Magic, and so just to kind of go back, for those who may not have heard, it used to be the Breakfast Club, Jim Harper's Breakfast Club on WNIC, and then that name was service marked, so we couldn't take it with us to Magic. So it was Jim Harper and the Magic Morning Show. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a group of us, and we would talk about our lives. We would talk about anything we wanted, and people loved it. And Jim always said, we are kind of like the neighbors, and everybody in the cars going to work or taking the kids to school, we're the neighbors, and we're talking over that electronic picket fence about stuff with you. And the relatability amazes me still. The followers the wonderful people that we called it the Magic Family, and it felt like that. So we would talk kind of like friends, kind of shows about nothing, but we would do that. And we had the freedom to talk as much as we wanted. But that was when ratings books were going on. So you'd get a ratings book from Arbitron, and you would write in your listening. And so you might say, I listened to Jim Harper and the Magic Morning Show, and write it all in. Well, there were stations that said, that's not fair. Our listeners aren't getting it. I'm kind of doing this in broad strokes. But what it ended in is we got rid of the little books, and people started using meters. So meters record what you do, not what you say you do. So you may put ditto marks from 6 to 10. I'm listening to Jim Harper in the Magic Morning Show. I'm just kind of giving you an example. And that would be reflected in the ratings. Meters record what you do. So let's say you hear something you don't like and you punch out. It says meter number 5 left. You can graph it. And you know that, they left it news. Oh, well, you know what? Let's cut back on the news. By the way, no, let's eliminate news. Let's not give them any reason to punch away. And let's keep the talk down. So by the end of our time at Greater Media and at Magic, we had gone from having extended conversations about things to we got, I think, 4 breaks where it could be 90 seconds to no more than 2 minutes.
Wow.
So it's muzzling. It's all about keep the music coming. And what I view is it takes away that local feel, because in a lot of cases, these big companies can have somebody voice tracking who lives who knows where, but they're able to knock out voice tracks for the midday show in 6 markets.
Right. And of course, a lot of these stations, the music programming is like computer generated.
It is totally.
In Des Moines or someplace.
Consultants, and they decide. And so people who think that they're going to go in at like the good old days, I'm old enough to remember listening to ABX and Riff when AOR, album-oriented rock, was just beginning. People could play whatever they wanted. They could explore.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when you could actually call into Riff or ABX and make a request and then wait a little while and you'd hear it.
You'd hear it. And they might say, hey, Sven wanted to hear this. Hey, here's this for you. I know.
That's long gone.
It is, except on satellite radio.
Yeah.
Because you can call in Flash Phelps on 60s on 6 on Sirius, and he will take you and he'll talk to you on the phone.
Right. So your job was eliminated effectively at WMGC.
At Magic. Yeah, they decided they didn't want a pricey, talky morning show.
Yeah.
So they...
Was that when they switched over to... Because now it's 105.1. Now it's throwback hip-hop. It's old school hip-hop.
They've been through so many formats. There was sports for a while. There was something... When we left and it stopped being Magic, I don't even remember, frankly.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me because I've been in that same situation where, I worked in print journalism, but I've been a victim of downsizing essentially with our publication shuttered. My job just was gone one day.
Goes away. Yes.
I saw your blog actually where you sort of chronicled that interim period before
my little Canty's Corner that that's some good research. I'm impressed, and I've kind of let it go. But it was an interesting period. What did you get out of that?
Well, I mean, I work, on this podcast. I also work as a freelance writer on the side, and I do a lot of different stuff, and so it resonated with you. I'm like, oh yeah, she's doing projects for Wyandotte.
I did Wyandotte Municipal Services. Yeah, my first thing after I'd gotten let go, and I'd never been let go, by the way.
Yeah,
which is rare in that business. I'd never had that experience.
So was that tough for you?
I will say, in credit to the managers at Greater Media, the decision was made back in Boston. We don't want to do this morning show, and the local folks executed that decision with compassion, even to the point where the day that I came in to sign my exit agreement, he took me to breakfast, the general manager. I appreciated it.
That's nice.
It's like, Steve, thanks. That was nice. It was.
I'm sure you got a severance and all that
kind
stuff.
Kind of. Yeah. It was something, but it was not. I was not ready to not be making money.
Sure.
And I was not mentally ready to not be doing that. Whereas now I'm at a point where I'm very ready to step away. So I was more just knocked off my moorings. But so that first job that I did for Wyandotte Municipal Services was back like my TV reporting days. So I found out, okay, the brain's still there, it can write. And then I did a bunch of projects for Beaumont Hospital's Cancer Center, cancer programs. And then that dovetailed into a nice chance meeting with my former general manager, the one that brought me back to WNIC in 1999. His name, a lovely man named Steve Schramm, who was the VP and general manager of Michigan Radio.
Yeah.
And so that's how I wound up in public radio.
Right. So that was 2012 when you caught on with Michigan Radio.
Yes.
Previously, you had been exclusively on the commercial radio side.
I had.
So what was that transition like?
Terrifying.
Why?
Such smart people are part of that team. And even though I'd been doing it for decades, you're coming in as the new kid who had all this commercial experience. But what Steve wanted was a bit more of a commercial sound to Stateside. He said, don't sound like the Saturday Night Live NPR people.
Was Stateside an existing program?
No, it had been a program for a while under a couple of hosts. Todd Munt had done it, and Charity Nebbe had done it, but it had been shelved. And Steve had been thinking about, I want to revive a locally produced program that focuses on Michigan. So he'd been toying with who would be the person, and so they took it off the shelf when he and I crossed paths. I did an audition, and it fit. I had to grow in my own mind to the person that could run with this team because they're pretty amazing. On the other hand, I'm in the business because of public radio. When I got out of college, I was working for the American Cancer Society. I was a health educator, and I was driving to and from the office. And coming home, I never missed this show on WDET called All Things Considered.
Yeah.
And that was back in 1977, 78. And then, oh my goodness, there's a morning version. It's morning edition. So that pulled me into how magical radio could be and radio storytelling could be.
Yeah.
So it felt like I was home.
Beyond the obvious things, commercial radio has advertisements, commercials.
It does.
Public radio does not. They have underwriting reads.
Fun drives.
And fun drives, right. But I mean, so beyond those obvious things, how are the two formats different?
Well, for me, having been in a world where I had been told you have 60 seconds to do headlines, weather, sports, traffic reports, two accidents. That's all you can do. And you have 60 seconds or you have a minute 15 to do it all. To come into an environment where I can do 18 minutes for a full segment interview. If it's worth it, we'll go 18 minutes. That is like the whole section of the paper instead of one little column in the front page of the paper. So that has been... You walk away satisfied. You don't walk away thinking, oh, I left so much that we weren't able to get to. It's great to walk away satisfied. So that's to me the biggest thing. In public radio, you have a place to be able to create.
You have more room and time.
Yeah.
Is it a little harder, more work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I will say that these 7 years, it's a different kind of work. But I have worked very, very hard. Instead of being in the news truck, like I was for so many years when I was at UPN 50. It was Fox 50 first, and then Fox left and WKBD, and we went to UPN eventually. But I was on the 10 o'clock news on Channel 50. So as opposed to rolling around in the news truck looking for where you're going to do that night's live shot, this is a lot of homework and I could be at home in my PJs, so there is that. But reading, because I have to be up on everything.
Yeah.
And I get prep material for every interview, but I do 5 to 8 interviews a day.
Right, I heard you say that.
A lot of prep.
That's how much, you get some help, though, from your producers.
The producers will, yes.
Right?
So let's just say I'm going to interview somebody who's a tech entrepreneur who's just gotten a lot of seed money to start a terrific new AI company in Ann Arbor. I will have gotten a form that tells me what the focus is that we want to get to maybe talk about what kinds of developments they're doing in AI,
what's
and
the
also
news bag,
and also what's the ecosystem, what's it for entrepreneurs so in Michigan. So that might be the peg. There will be pre-interview notes because one of our interns have pre-interviewed the person most likely. There might be some links for me to read, so stories that have been written about them. And sometimes people will do a few suggested questions because they like to get creative too. And it's great for me to see an angle that I hadn't thought of. But then ultimately, I got to digest all of that. I craft all the leads and I craft the questions that you hear. And the lead writing is an art because you want to make it something that grabs you, that isn't too long, but helps people understand what it's about. So I do a lot of that writing.
Who are some of your favorite interviewer people, the people in the business? Do you try to emulate anybody?
Oh, interview people. I thought you meant guests.
No, I mean actual interviewers, people who are asking the questions.
It's interesting. I dive in and out, and especially as I'm driving home. So I might be listening to, MSNBC or CNN. Do I listen to a lot of radio interviews? I don't. You know why? Because it's Coles to Newcastle. So when I'm driving home, I'm probably listening to the Broadway channel. I'm listening to Radio Classics. So you've
had enough talk.
I kind of have, my brain is just pooped and it knows it's going to be doing work at home. So I've got my playlist going with music. So I tend to not do a lot, but I'll hear Like, I happen to really like Nicole Wallace on MSNBC because I appreciate how she's made this transition into TV journalism, and she's very natural. Well, Susan Stamberg, I mean, going right back, Terry Gross.
Terry Gross she's a legend, yeah.
Diane Rehm.
Yeah.
Because of I like that tone of civility and that any point of view is welcome. And that's really what we try to do, too. And actually, I had the pleasure of sitting down and interviewing her about her most recent book about her husband's passing. And
Interesting.
Yes. And she has people who adore her. We did it at Hill Auditorium, and it was full of adoring, actually not Hill, I think it was even bigger than that. I forget, we were somewhere on campus, and she has people that adore her, and for good reason. So people like that are articulate, are respectful. I cannot stand shouting. I cannot stand panels of people shouting at each other.
Your persona on Stateside is, you come across as very friendly and approachable. Maybe that's from your time on NIC. And
part of that, I think it is.
Yeah.
And it's who I am. I'm not aggressive interviewer who's going to pick you up and slam you against the wall. That's that's not me, and it never has been.
Right. But at the same time, you've interviewed lots of politicians, governors, presidential candidates. You recently had Justin Amash, the West Michigan congressman, Tea Party member who just defected from the Republican Party.
Declared his Declaration of Independence on Independence Day.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we're in this hyper-partisan political era. I mean, is it tough to do those kind of interviews now?
I try to step back, and I'm not there to carry water for listeners who are unhappy that we're talking to whomever, or for the person. I'm there to ask the questions, to let them put their ideas out there so that everyone listening can say, here's a set of ideas. You decide for yourself if you agree or disagree. Like I've noticed with many of the social media comments with Justin Amash are, I hate the kinds of things that he was doing when before it was the Freedom Caucus, it was Tea Party, and it was people will say, I disagree with decisions he made, but I respect what he did here, putting the country before the party and stepping away. So you see that, and I'll get people going, why didn't you ask this and ask that? Because it isn't, I don't see myself as the one to smack them around. We will ask and ask again. And if somebody won't give a straight answer, there are a lot of politicians who are very good at not answering questions. I felt he answered directly, thoughtfully, and his message was an interesting one of we need to look each other in the eye. We need to stop demonizing each other for believing believing different things. And he said we need to love each other a little more, which I don't think is a bad message in America of 2019.
Megan Rapinoe, the star of the Women's World Cup and the U.S. national team, just said at the victory parade.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall with coffee between the two of those people.
Well, I have this little thing that I do after I've had an interesting guest, and I'll come in and I'll go, there's another one for the dream dinner party.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll do. People that I find really interesting and I just personally connect with. And I agree. Wouldn't it be great to get people together of a lot of different backgrounds and serve some wine and some good food and just see what the conversation's like?
It's actually a great idea for a podcast show or a radio show or something.
Yeah, the dream dinner party.
So who are a few people that would be in that party?
Wow. Let's see. I'm going to start, and these are guests that I've had on Stateside that I'm just always light up when I see their names. Charlie Ballard, Michigan State University economist.
Oh, yeah.
The guy that can make economics interesting because he brings such energy.
He's got a book that has been on my list for a long time. Yeah.
Charlie's great. Gleaves Whitney. Gleaves Whitney used to be a speechwriter for John Engler, and he is now at Grand Valley State, where he's the Hounstein Center for Presidential Studies director. So he's our kind of presidential historian, and since I was a history major, I get excited. Debbie Dingell. I just find she has so much heart, and I admired greatly the public service career of the dean of the House of John Dingell. Congressman Dan Kildee, Congressman Fred Upton. I always enjoy talking to him. I would now put Justin Amash on that after having talked with him. That's somebody I'd like to kind of explore the conservative point of view with.
One of the things I enjoy about that list, though, is that although there are some names that some people would know, it's not like a default to the big stars, right?
No.
And personally, when it comes to conversations, I feel like although sometimes larger names bring in audiences or drive-by audiences, to me, the best conversations happen with the folks a little bit quote
Yes.
unquote below that or don't have as much attention. They are willing to have more candid and interesting conversations that I feel like the audience values more.
Yeah, and then I love being able to tell stories and help. I would bring a gentleman, and right now I'm having a senior moment, and his name is John, and he was one of the longest serving exonerees in U.S. history, and he went away in Michigan prison in 1967, and he just got out a year or two ago. And he was unjustly convicted, and he's now been exonerated. And this man has become an artist, and I'm hating that I'm forgetting his name. I can see his lovely face, and I've had him on a couple of times. Oh, I'm kicking myself. I would have him at the head of the table. What a story he tells, because he spent decades in prison, but he did not come out full of vitriol. He came out ready to start his life again, and he's kind of like, let's move on. What a lesson he can teach anyone in his dealing the hand, coping with the hand he was dealt.
So, like, the three of us here in the studio are clearly all, news media fans. We absorb, podcasts and read papers and so forth like a sponge.
And I do love my newspapers because I'm old. I'm a baby boomer. I pounce for my papers.
But we're living in this era when people say that they hate the news media and they don't trust it.
Right.
We hear it all the time. I mean, why do you think that is? I'm sure you hear that too.
Well, I think I do. I hear it less in my world of public radio.
Well, public radio is famous. Its fans are legion.
Yes.
They're very devoted.
Yeah, and so if you're listening, and if you've come in to check us out on Michigan radio, whether online or tuning in one of the stations around the state, I think people who do that are turning to us because they feel they can trust us. And I think what's kind of behind that feeling of it's not journalism is the rise of cable news, where it isn't journalism. It's panels of people shouting opinions at each other.
I was seeing examples of this, not just nationally, but locally, where it's over and over again, where you have two people just staring at the camera going, "You're un-American." And there are two people, in this case, it was two folks who are on the state level. And I'm sitting there going, why are we yelling about Donald Trump when both of you need to talk to me about your road funding plan?
There you go.
But nobody pushed them about it, right? Nobody's kept them on track and said, this is where you can affect change. And
that matters in people's lives.
Right. And that's, I think, where we're getting away from, right, is that it's that having to talk about, and not that these issues aren't important, but there are so many things that are happening that have direct impact on people's lives. If people want to get very involved in their community, the best way to do it is in local service. Be part of your local city council, run for state rep, be a part of a district captain if you're a party person, if you're a political party person.
Right.
There are so many ways to do it other than the top. Not that we shouldn't lose focus, but other than the president, there's so much more. And there's also so much content out there that's just hot takes on the national scene. And I'm not just talking about Trump, but that happened under Obama.
Oh, sure.
Happened before then. And
have
there's enough of that out there in the world.
Well, there is, because these cable networks have to feed the beast. When you're running programming 24/7, then, everybody who comes in has their panel of people, and let's all disagree. And I find it, it wears me out. I would much prefer to talk to people, community activist who is trying to make the neighborhood better in her corner of Detroit by creating a home where kids can come and feel welcome.
Yeah, I think the invention of 24-hour cable news networks was a bad step in history. Like I still think as much. I mean, there's tons of news. Obviously, they've gotten proficient at filling the 24-hour news hole, but it's not really. They're just rehashing stuff and just talking.
Because
and rehashing.
How often do you hear of there's some news story, whatever, and you want to hear more about it, but then as soon as they kick in, it's back to those same words. It's Trump and Mueller. Because what's happening in Washington at this point in our history, like it or hate it, it's consuming so much oxygen.
But that actually gets me to the point of what I really appreciate about Stateside and Cards on Table. I think about that when we're doing this show, is that you really do a great job of covering what you know really well. Like, Stateside is about Michigan. It is the place to go for all things Michigan. And if there's a tie-in to the National, you obviously do it, right? You were talking about Upton and talking about Amash. Those are tie-ins to the National, but the national hot take doesn't drive the conversation. No. It's much more about what's happening in places all over the state. And this is a state that's big. You were mentioning about Ireland. I believe in land area, aren't we kind of similar to the Britain or the United Kingdom or something? It's a crazy amount of area that Michigan has.
It is, and we do tend to be kind of siloed, and that's and what you just said warmed my heart, because that's really the mission. How do we Michiganize whatever story, or find stories in Michigan? And you're right. So if we're going to talk to somebody in Colorado about the cannabis industry and what they've learned, it's because we want to be able to say, all right, Michigan, now that we have this legalized, what have they learned? They're a few years down the road in Colorado or in Washington. What have we learned? So we Michiganize it.
And I think that's an extra step, and it's extra work. So one of my mentors was Marge Sorge, and she's somebody who worked at the Detroit News, worked in auto publications. Yes. And she taught me that every story has a local angle. The question is, are you willing to do the work? And if you're not willing to do the work, don't do the story.
There you go. And we have this incredible hive of worker bees in the Stateside room, led by, and I want to do a big shout out to our executive producer, Joe Lindstroth, who is such a fine journalist, who's always pushing and always curious and always raising the bar. How can we do better? Helping we have smart interns who come in, and he helps them craft their thinking to be able to push it. What's the next story? Don't just do the obvious story. What is that angle? Dig in. What questions? And so he set that. I call him our fearless leader. So fearless leader sets that direction, and we reject a lot of good story ideas or pitches. So and so big name persons coming in, big name authors coming in. Are they from Michigan? Well, you know what? No.
You will, at the end of the year when you officially retire, you will have been at the helm of Stateside for almost 8 years, right?
Yeah, 7.5. We launched right around, I want to say it's like September 5th of 2012. So if I go, it'll be like a 7.5-year stint. And it much depends on when they find the replacement host. Yeah. So I don't have a total date yet. I'm, in my mind, hoping end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Given your focus, policy, politics, the arts
and
culture, lifestyle,
history,
everything, current events. I mean, what have you sort of learned about Michigan over that time, good and bad?
I think the good is seeing people at sometimes unseen grassroots levels who are out there plugging all the time to find ways to make their communities better. Mm-hmm. Neighborhood activists in Detroit, people in West Michigan who are trying to extend opportunities to Black entrepreneurs to kind of get rooted in areas where they had been shut out. People, Anishinaabe leaders who are trying to put a space for Native culture and history out there for us to see. So I love those below the surface kinds of stories that we can say, look what people are doing to make the state better. Mm-hmm. So I have really liked that. I have felt that our process so often, as I've watched it, is you just hear about the stories old as can be, people shouting at each other when you see what happens in the legislature in Lansing, and here's an idea, but we don't like it because of that. So you see that headbutting all the time, and I don't know that it's gone away.
No.
Now we have the situation of having a governor from one party, a legislature from the other, and we're seeing what's happening. It's not pretty.
Loggerheads so far. Yeah.
Loggerheads.
Yeah. What do you have planned when you retire? Like, you obviously have the cottage in Ireland, you mentioned.
Yes.
And I know you like to travel a lot.
I do. And that was what I was saying to my husband is all I want in life is to be able to do trips. I want to be able to get to the Upper Peninsula. I've got my bucket list of car trips that can extend beyond the usual 2-week vacation. So I really, really want to see the UP. I've made all these interesting conversations happen with people up there, and I've been saying...
Have you never been?
Except
my God.
No, I really haven't, because over the years...
Breaking news, only exclusive on Daily Detroit. Host of Stateside has never been to the UP.
I have been to Tequamanon Falls. I was there when I was little.
Okay, well, that's the UP.
That is the UP. Yeah. I was little. But as a adult with a family, you know why? Because my husband's parents were in Ireland. So when we would get our vacation, we were on the plane every year to go see Grandma and Grandpa.
The place to see, if you're into drive-ins at all,
Yeah.
Clyde's. Clyde's Drive-In Burgers.
Right in St. Ignace.
Yeah, right outside of
Lovely.
St. Ignace. It's good. We'll break the hunger once you cross the Mackinac Bridge.
I just want to be able to get in the car, and I love doing those kind of trips with my husband, and we haven't done extended ones. So I want to get up and just meander and explore. So that and do it in the fall.
It's beautiful country up there. It really is.
Yeah,
You are
I
in
love
for
the
a
UP.
treat.
I know. That's exciting. I want to drive west. I want us to do a road trip there.
Have you thought about going around? So you go up through the UP and then go
maybe.
through,
Yeah,
like go
down-
back down and then go through Chicago
down.
and come back?
Yeah. We have done some Wisconsin because my husband's company used to have his past employer had a plant in Necedah, Wisconsin, and it's out there. It's and the reason it is because the Farnham brothers who founded it years ago like to fish there, so they thought I'm going to build a plant here, so I have a reason to come to Necedah. So I have seen that, but man, I do want to get up and I want to see Green Bay. I really want to get up, and I want to take the that Canadian train from Sault Ste. Marie.
Oh, yeah. That's on my list too.
That's
that
on the
one,
list.
Yep. And although it's not in Michigan, I definitely want to do that California train. There's like that Silver Line that goes through the mountains.
Oh,
I'm a big
please.
train nerd.
Yeah,
So
and I'd like to explore that more. And again, I just never had the time because usually in broadcasting, all those years in commercial radio, 1 week. Because I was lucky enough where they actually bent the rules big time for me because of the place in Ireland where I could have 2 weeks. But most people in radio, it's a 1 week thing. That just you're there and you're turning around and coming back. So that's kind of impinged my travel.
You mentioned earlier the name Susan Stamberg,
Yes.
legendary figure for NPR.
Yes.
Do you plan to kind of follow her model and be sort of like this, broadcast host emeritus, and you can do special projects occasionally with Michigan Radio?
Well, interesting that you mentioned that because that was mentioned when I talked to our general manager, to Steve Schramm, and to Zoe Clark, our program director, who said, and so yes, there would be. I even said to them, look, when you find your new host, and if that new host is going to take a vacation week, I would love to come back and do that. So actually, yes, you have twigged onto something because there could be projects and certainly filling in on stateside. There would not be a learning curve.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
maybe you should bring a recorder with you up to the UP.
But then I'd be working again.
Oh, well, yeah.
There's the on-off switch, and it is very refreshing to put the off switch on, to put it on, to turn it off and kind of be able to disconnect. There's that feeling of when you're staring at the sun so long, you get a headache. You need to kind of look away from the sun for a while, and then just enjoy it as a civilian. I guess is kind of my thought there.
Yep. Well, Cynthia Canty, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. And
thank you for the work you're doing. I think this is fantastic. You are the media that is, granular, and you're able to you've got so many ways to be able to tell stories here. So bravo to you for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. Cynthia Canty, everybody, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. We've got some great episodes coming together for you. It has been a crazy 2019, and let's be honest, sorry, Shianne, I think it's going to be an even crazier 2020.
I'm sure it will be. And by the way, thanks for listening. I'm Shianne Nosarini.
And I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and let's make Detroit better together.